How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this week's Q&A. So like any other week, if you want a chance to one of your questions being answered, make sure you do drop a comment down below. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the first question of the week. And it is, are some of the updates with these J-Series rod bearing recalls that are affecting a numerous amount of Hondas and Acuras? The problem seems to be a lot more on the Acura side versus the Honda side. So let me explain. So for me, I work at a Honda store, and we've had a total of 2 pilots come in for the recall. So both of those pilots did end up needing new rod bearings. There was no damage to the crankshaft or the bearings. They were in great shape, so there was no need to go any further than just replacing it with the appropriate size rod bearings, which do seem to be different from the 2 that I did from what comes in the vehicle. So again, on the Honda side, seems to be very minimum, and the catastrophic failure seems to be even less. So it's a big procedure. I actually made a video on this. On the Acura side, I talked to a few different technicians, and they're constantly doing crankshafts on these engines. So I haven't seen many cases where there's been catastrophic damage to the point where a whole long block is needed. So if it fails the bearing inspection, at that point, it at minimum needs a crankshaft. Obviously, if it comes to knocking or if it tossed a rod, then that would be considered a catastrophic damage, and you'd probably be getting a new long block at that point. So in most cases, it's going to be rod bearings and or a crankshaft replacement, which requires the engine to come out of the vehicle and get a new crankshaft, new bearings, etc., and you go from there. So as far as these jobs being successful, I haven't heard of too many horror stories. I have heard some of them that maybe the bearings weren't put in correctly, or in one case, somebody actually forgot a bearing in the car, almost noticed it immediately, but at that point it was too far, too late already. So unfortunately, this stuff's gonna happen when you have a ton of recalls on these, especially on the Acura side, which these technicians are telling me sometimes they're seeing between 5 to 10 a day. That's a huge job and a lot of pressure for anybody in the industry to undertake and just to take on for themselves. So please be patient with these technicians. Do not rush them. This is not a job you want to rush, especially if you live in a area where you're going to be dealing with rust like we do here. Cars with 50,000-60,000 miles, those exhaust bolts are a pain to take out. So and if the engine has to come out, even more so. So again, if you are affected by one of these, please be patient. You don't want any of these technicians making a mistake. It could be anything as far as the wrong bearing in the wrong place, dirt on a bearing, a piece of lint, not torquing everything correctly, missing a torque step, whatever the case may be. Do not rush these people. I know it's frustrating, but please be patient. It will be the best outcome for everybody involved. So hopefully there's a question for you. All right, so the next question is, what are my thoughts on a second generation NSX? I personally love the car. I'll hope to own one myself one day. I think it's very unique. It's not a car you see there a ton of times. You see plenty of other cars for a lot higher money, way more often than you see these second generation NSXs. So anytime you're purchasing a car, you should definitely do your homework, run a Carfax, see if there's anything that comes up. No news is good news. So in this case, we haven't seen anything major. I talked to a couple different Acura technicians, high-level techs, and they haven't seen anything big on a consistent basis, which is good. I wouldn't be too worried about the engine, powertrain, or anything like that. Obviously, anything could go wrong at any time, but not something that I would be personally concerned with. So when purchasing these cars, once again, look at the body panels, look at the color, make sure the fitment is right, make sure there's no water smell inside the car, make sure there's no rust, make sure it hasn't been modified so bumpers removed and put back on the car. Look at all the bolts and clips, make sure everything looks original. If you're paying a premium for these cars, it should come as stock and as well taken care of as possible. So anything, if it's been modified, chances are it's been abused and maybe something went wrong, so they return it back to who knows, So I'd rather wait and be patient, find a perfect one for you. You're spending a lot of money on these cars, sometimes $100+ on them. I do think with the election year, we may see a small decrease in price. I know people get all reserved and stuff right around election year. or election time. And then I think in the near and far future, the prices will absolutely skyrocket with these as they get more and more rare and unique than they already are. So again, something that is definitely a awesome, beautiful machine. And I would definitely get one, and I hope to get one day. So if you're willing to pull the trigger and you have the money and you can afford it, then absolutely, I would go for it. Just be careful. Take a technician with you if needed. Take a paint guy, whatever. You know, if you got to pay him a couple dollars or whatever, it's worth your investment, because you don't want to make the wrong purchase and purchase something that's been tampered with or messed with or modified or whatever the case may be, because once again, it is a huge spending that you're going to undertake, and you just want to make sure you're covered at all angles. So hopefully that answers the question for you. So you have an issue with your car, you YouTubed it, you Googled it, whatever the case may be, and you found what you think may be your issue. And a solution to that issue. So should you just rely solely on that person on YouTube, just like me, to say that is your issue and go ahead and spend X amount of money or time replacing a part? So no, you should do your due diligence, do your homework. Just because somebody's saying this may be your issue, it does not mean that is your issue. Even if it's a common issue, and 9 out of 10 times that could be the repair, you still want to do your due diligence and check for yourself. If you want to go ahead, if it's a couple bucks and you want to take the chance, great. If it's something that's either labor intensive or very expensive, again, do your homework, make sure you do your proper diagnostics, or take it to a mechanic, technician, see if they agree with that diagnostics from whatever source you found that repair for. So again, even if I say something doesn't mean that's your issue. You should definitely go ahead and check it yourself. Now, if you want to go ahead and do it and take the risk, then obviously that's on you. But I would personally still, get it looked at, get it checked over. You want to make sure that you're not getting ripped off. If you think it's something simple and you just don't want to do it, don't have the tools, whatever the case may be, you take it to somebody else. Like, hey, well, that looks pretty simple to do. And they charge you a ton of money for something that looks fairly simple, but still out of your, comfortness, then so be it. Just know that you can use that as a reference to, kind of work with the price. You don't want to lowball these people either. At the end of the day, they are still a professional. But you just gotta use all your resources and kind of piece together everything you need to get the repair done right and successful. So hopefully that answers the question for you. So you have a high mileage vehicle and you want to just check the overall health of the engine. So at this point, if you've owned the car for a while, you probably know if it's consuming oil or not. So if it's consuming oil, then obviously the engine's not doing as great as it should be, and most likely does need some bottom end work, most likely piston rings. So that would be an obvious one at that point. If you're purchasing the car new, you're not going to know this. The person probably isn't going to tell you that it's consuming oil, because it wouldn't be in their best interest to tell them the engine has a internal engine and obviously, decreasing the value of the vehicle. So let's say it's not consuming oil, great. You just want to do an overall check. So an easy thing to do, even before you purchase a vehicle, is pull out the dipstick. If the dipstick is metal, or sometimes on these Hondas, they're like orange, and if they're not a bright color, chances are, and they're stained with, like a brownish kind of look, chances are it wasn't maintained properly, and it does consume some oil. Not all times, but in most cases from what I've seen, inconsistent oil changes do end up also staining that dipstick. So that's a really good indicator of something, even before you go ahead and wait to see the results. So another thing you could do is obviously do a compression test. This is not something that you're going to be able to do on the sell lot, but if you own the vehicle or if you buy the vehicle, you could always run a compression test and just kind of see where your numbers are, whatever the specification is for that engine, and then make sure they're as even as possible across the board, whether it's a 3-cylinder, a 4-cylinder, a 6, an 8, whatever the case may be. You want them to be as consistent as possible. So if you do find an inconsistency at that point, you could do a leak down test, and that would kind of tell you how bad that cylinder is, but also sometimes it could tell you where the issue is. So maybe like an exhaust side or the intake side, or it could be in the bottom end side and you're losing a compression through the bottom end. So, that's also a good test, not something that a lot of people will be able to do, especially since you do need compressed air. So again, not something you're going to be able to do out in the lot, but something that you could pay somebody to do afterwards. Or sometimes if you're buying a used car, you could take that used car possibly to a repair facility. I mean, it happens to us all the time, and people want to do a just overall health check of the vehicle before they commit to purchasing that vehicle. So not all used car places may agree to that. Probably most of them won't, but it's just something to consider. I would look at common issues with that engine before even going there, engine, transmission, whatever the case may be, before buying a used car, kind of like our previous question. But sometimes there's stuff out of the norm, stuff out of whack. So sometimes people try to hide things. So yeah, you should definitely, get it checked over, especially if it's a higher mileage vehicle. Now, if it's got 200,000 miles, don't expect a perfectly run engine. Yes, there could be those instances that we have one, but in most cases, 200,000 miles, you're probably paying pretty cheap for the vehicle anyways. So it's probably going to need some maintenance, hopefully not an engine, but you never know. So you kind of have to play it by ear here. And it just really makes it difficult to pinpoint, especially if you're buying a vehicle used and whatnot. And now if you've owned the vehicle for a while, once again, and you've been keeping up the maintenance, it's probably going to be okay. Just make sure that you are doing that maintenance, and like that, you could, prolong the longevity of that engine for as long as possible. So hopefully that answers the question for you. All right, so last but not least, question of the week. And once again, if you want a chance of winning questions being answered, make sure you do drop a comment down below. So some causes of a P0420 or P0430 codes, which is a catalytic converter efficiency code, which essentially just means that the catalytic converter no longer is performing as designed. So what can cause that code? Well, first of all, it could be an actual bad catalytic converter, right? So let's not diminish the fact that your cat could actually be defective. So sometimes, and this actually happens in some of the J series on the Honda side, it could be fuel injectors causing this code, or just bad software, the O2 sensors, just thinking that something is off when it's actually not. So some of those cases, it could be something as simple as a software error or glitch, which a lot of times it probably will be covered by a manufacturer and some sort of a bulletin or a recall or whatever the case may be. So a second thing that I see obviously could be a faulty O2 sensor. So if the O2 sensor is not reading correctly, it could think that the catalytic converter is not doing this job. And this would be the O2 sensor after the catalytic converter, not the primary O2 sensor before it. So that would be that. Also, we see at times if there is an exhaust leak between the primary and the secondary O2 sensor, it could actually cause the O2 sensor to think that the reading is off when there is just an exhaust leak. At that point, you would probably need the catalytic converter itself. Most of these cars, they are bolted onto the head nowadays. Back in the day, it used to be underneath the vehicle. And as we know, those get stolen a lot. So a lot of manufacturers move them up there for various different reasons, not for just theft purposes, but just move them and bolted them onto the head. So that is that. So hopefully that answers the question for you, and I'll catch everyone on the next one.